I was out in the forest a few weeks ago. I thought it'd be a good idea to spend some time alone and collect wildlife sounds. I set up my tent in a small clearing as the sun dipped below the trees. It felt calm, and I thought it would be a great experience. But that night changed everything. I was sitting by the fire trying to relax. As I closed my eyes, I heard it, a soft whispering from the woods. I thought I was imagining it. Maybe it was just the wind. I told myself I was being silly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. The next morning, the whispers were still there, a bit clearer this time. I felt a chill. I checked my notes and decided to head deeper into the woods. I wanted to record some interesting sounds, but the deeper I went, the stronger that nagging feeling became. I caught glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision. Each time I turned to look, nothing was there, just trees. I spent the next few days recording different animal calls. No rare sounds, but those whispers kept coming back. They felt like conversations I couldn't understand. I started noticing shadows shifting around my camp. Sometimes I saw figures darting into the trees. My heart raced and I felt a cold grip on my throat. Was it just a deer? I didn't know. One night, after a long day, I heard it clear as day. My name echoed in the forest. Lucas. I froze. I got up to look around, but I was alone. It felt like the forest was alive, but it didn't reveal itself. My mind raced. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. I blamed isolation for my fear, but deep down, I felt something was wrong. I never got to see those shadowy figures. They always stayed at the edge of my sight, making me feel uneasy. It affected my thoughts. It felt like I had crossed some invisible line, but I didn't know what I had done. On my last night, I sensed movement right by the tree line. I called out, "Who's there?" My voice echoed back. Suddenly, I heard it again, clearer this time. "Lucas." I turned, hoping to see someone. Nothing was there. My heart thumped in my chest. I stood frozen, looking into the darkness. The forest felt heavy. I didn't know if I should run or stay put. I was scared, but I couldn't tear myself away from that spot. I never understood what happened. I almost felt like I had angered something in the woods. The whispers haunted my thoughts even as I packed up in the morning. Weeks later, I still think about it. I can't shake the feeling of being watched, or the echo of my name in the silence. I wonder if the forest is still whispering, still waiting for someone else. I tried to go back to my normal life after that trip. I even thought about going back into the woods to prove to myself that everything was fine. But each time I closed my eyes, those whispers came back, echoing in the back of my mind. I avoided the forest, though I dreamt of it. The twisted trees, the weight of silence, and the sound of my name haunted me. One evening I decided to review the recordings I had made. I sat on my bed, listening to the faint animal calls, the rustling leaves. Then something caught my attention. At the very edge of a track I hadn't noticed before, there was a faint noise, almost like a voice, but too far away to discern the words. I leaned in closer, straining to detect any familiar syllables. It felt like the whispers were slipping through my fingers. I tried to dismiss it as static or wind interference. Nonetheless, curiosity and dread had me fastened to my chair. I listened to that section repeatedly, each time hoping to hear something new. That's when I noticed a pattern. The whispers seemed to rise and swell at certain intervals, almost in rhythm with my recorded heartbeats. Heart pounding, I couldn't shake the feeling this was important. Feeling overwhelmed, I decided to take a break. I stepped outside for some fresh air, but the night sky instead brought memories flooding back. Memories of the forest and that soft, echoing whisper. I glanced back at the faint glow of my window. A shiver ran down my spine. I shouldn't have gone back to listen. Something about it felt wrong. The next morning I received a text from a friend. "Hey, did you hear about the search party?" The message felt like a punch to the gut. A couple of hikers went missing in the woods, around the area you camped. My fingers trembled as I read it again. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. How could people go missing in an area so familiar to me? I spent the rest of the day attempting to shake off the uneasy feeling, but the news lingered. What if I had stumbled into something? What if those whispers were warnings? Or worse, what if they were echoing from the lost hikers? Their names could still be floating through the trees. That night I couldn't sleep. I picked up my phone and looked up everything I could about the disappearances. Each article made my heart race, witnesses claiming to hear voices. Someone said they had felt as though they were being followed by shadows. The details were unsettling. I felt more connected to the forest than I wanted to admit. Then came the unexpected call. It was a forest ranger, asking if I'd seen anything unusual during my time there. I hesitated. Should I tell him about the whispers? Instead, I mentioned the shadows. He was quiet for a moment. "You're not the only one who has felt those things, you know," he said slowly. "But let me warn you, Lucas, the forest doesn't forget. Keep your distance." That word, "the forest doesn't forget," sent chills through me. What did that mean? Suddenly I felt the weight of their eyes again, staring from the depths of the trees. I looked outside, half expecting to see someone watching back. And just then, I noticed something unusual in my yard. A small, dark figure stood where the trees bordered the edge of my property. My breath caught in my throat. I squinted, but it vanished. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I heard it again, clearer this time, a whisper calling my name. "Lucas." I backed away from the window. Panic flooded my thoughts. I had to figure out what was happening before it was too late. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every creak of the house, every rustle outside, sent a jolt of fear through me. I wanted to dismiss it, to go back to bed, but sleep didn't come easy that night. Instead, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the weight of the ranger's words heavy on my mind. When dawn finally broke, I felt a small sense of relief. I grabbed my phone and looked up the search party again. The more I read, the more I realized I had to do something. Ignoring it wouldn't help. I needed to go back to the forest, to face whatever was haunting me. Maybe I could solve the mystery of those whispers, or, at the very least, find some closure. As I stepped outside, the morning light felt oddly comforting. I took a deep breath, letting the freshness of the air wash away my lingering fears. I grabbed a backpack, filling it with essentials, a couple of water bottles, a flashlight, and just in case, my recorder. I thought it might help capture whatever it was that had called to me. The drive to the forest brought a wave of nostalgia mixed with dread. I parked my car at the same spot where I had begun my earlier hike. The sun was shining, but strangely, it felt like the warmth was being pulled away by the trees, as if nature itself was watching me. As I stepped onto the trail, each footfall seemed to stir the ground beneath me. I followed the familiar path, but everything felt different somehow, stranger. The trees loomed taller, the shadows deeper. I reached the campsite I remembered so vividly, the stillness wrapping around me like a thick fog. When I sat down, I felt uneasy, as if the forest silence was waiting for me to break it. Feeling silly but desperate, I pulled out my recorder. I pressed record and started speaking, hoping my voice would somehow pierce through the haunting quiet. "If anyone is here, please show yourself. I just want to understand." As my words faded into the air, the eagerness inside me began to wane. I thought about turning back when suddenly a sound breached the stillness. A low, drawn-out whisper filled the air, sending chills down my spine. "Lucas?" I froze. There it was again, unmistakable. My heart raced as I looked around, but saw nothing except the surrounding trees. I could feel my instincts screaming at me to leave, but something compelled me to stay. Gathering my courage, I called out, "Who's there?" The whisper stopped, but a different sound rose in its place, a crackling noise. I turned to my left and was shocked to find a small clearing I hadn't noticed before. In its center, a tangle of roots and branches formed a crude, skeletal shape. My stomach sank. It looked like a human figure, but it wasn't moving. I stepped forward, captivated. That's when I saw it, a scrap of clothing caught between the roots. It was a faded fabric similar to what someone might wear hiking. My breath caught, the implications swirling through my mind like a storm. Had I stumbled upon something tied to the missing hikers? As I reached out, the whispers returned, echoing louder and clearer. My name rang out, this time not just a gentle call, but a shrill cry of panic. "Lucas!" I yanked my hand back, my heart racing. I turned to leave, but everything went dark. The sun disappeared behind the clouds, and for the briefest moment I was completely surrounded by shadows. I could hardly breathe as I staggered back, realizing the forest hadn't just forgotten, it was reclaiming its own. I staggered, trying to regain my balance, but the shadows felt alive. They pressed in around me, thick and suffocating. It was as if the forest itself were a living entity, hungry and waiting. I fumbled for my flashlight, my hands trembling as I flicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating tangled branches and the skeletal shape, but it did nothing to quell my growing panic. The whisper returned, now louder, more urgent. "Lucas!" It echoed like a chant from all directions, the voices blending into a haunting chorus that filled my mind with dread. I turned, trying to pinpoint their source, but the trees loomed like giants, their bark twisted and gnarled. My heart raced. I had to get out. I took a hesitant step back toward the path, my mind racing through the implications of what I'd found. What if it belonged to one of the missing hikers? Surely they couldn't be gone forever. A small, desperate part of me wondered if I could help, but I felt the cold grip of fear tighten around my chest. As I turned to retreat, something caught my eye, a movement at the edge of the flashlight beam. I froze, squinting to see more clearly. In the shadows, I noticed another tangle. This one was a bundle, wrapped tightly in more of the same faded fabric. Strange symbols were stitched into it, dark and cryptic. I had to approach it. Cautiously, I stepped closer, keeping the light steady. Each movement felt like a mistake, as though I were stumbling deeper into a trap. The whispers morphed into frantic whispers. "Help us!" They were reaching out for me, pulling me in. Suddenly I heard a distinct snap of a twig behind me. My heart leapt into my throat. I wasn't alone. I whirled around, the flashlight beam sweeping across the trees. Then I saw her, the silhouette of a woman, pale and draped in shadow. Her eyes, two dark voids, locked onto mine, and I felt a chill that crawled up my spine. "Help," she mouthed. But no sound came. I knew I should run, but my feet felt like they were glued to the earth. The forest held me captive. Before I could process what was happening, she vanished back into the dark, leaving behind nothing but silence and the smell of wet earth. I blinked, hardly able to believe what I had just witnessed. My breath came in frantic spurts. I turned back to the clearing, desperate to make sense of it all. The skeletal shape and the bundled fabric were gone. Just as quickly as they had appeared, they were swallowed by the forest. The whispers resumed, now soft, almost comforting. "Lucas." It felt like a final warning. Something had changed, and I could sense the forest shifting again. I couldn't stay any longer. I turned and sprinted back through the trees, branches clawing at me as I pushed through, desperate for the path. Then I tripped, falling onto the ground. My flashlight flickered, and in that brief moment of darkness, I heard the whisper again, clearer than before, filled with urgency. "You must remember." Panic surged anew. As I scrambled to my feet, I wondered what I'd forgotten or ignored. The shadows loomed closer, and I could feel the grip of the forest tightening around me, determined to show me whatever I had missed. I stumbled onto the path, the entrance to the forest a blurred line in the distance. The last of the whispers faded, replaced by an ominous silence that rang in my ears. I had to leave before whatever was out there pulled me back in. What I had seen wasn't just a figment of my imagination. It was real, and it wanted something from me. As I burst out of the trees, I turned back for one last look. The forest stood still, but I could swear I saw figures moving behind the trunks, watching. With a jolt of fear, I realized that what had happened today was only the beginning. I had entered a realm where the past and present intertwined, and something was stirring, waiting for me to uncover its truth. I bolted down the trail, my lungs burning with the effort. The shadows of the forest seemed to linger at my back, whispering into the cool air as if they didn't want me to leave. Guilt gnawed at me for running away, but the urge to survive was stronger. My heart raced in time with my footsteps, thudding against my ribs like a desperate warning. As I reached my car parked at the roadside, I grasped the door handle, my fingers shaking. I was about to hop inside when I noticed something on the passenger seat. It looked out of place, a piece of crumpled fabric. It was one of those same faded rags. My stomach churned as I recalled the symbols etched across the other bundle in the forest. I hesitated, part of me wanting to pull it out, the other part screaming at me to drive away, forget everything, and never look back. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to move. I slid into the seat, grabbed the fabric, and unfolded it cautiously. The symbols mirrored the ones I'd seen before, strange, twisted shapes that made my skin prickle. My mind raced with questions. How had it gotten there? Was it a warning or a clue? Suddenly, a cold gust of wind swept through the car, making the fabric flutter and almost feel alive in my hands. I glanced in the rearview mirror and froze. The woman from the forest stood there, just outside the trees lining the road. Her silhouette glowed faintly against the dimming light, her dark eyes penetrating through the glass. Panic gripped me once more, and I scrambled to start the engine. But before I could, her mouth moved, forming words that I couldn't hear, but felt reverberate in my chest. "Help us." The plea was unmistakable, laced with undeniable despair. My heart clenched painfully. I hesitated, a mix of fear and compassion flooding my thoughts. What did she want from me? What was I supposed to do? "I can't," I whispered to myself, my hands clammy on the steering wheel. That's when I saw it. A shadow shifted across the road in front of the car, darting through the trees like a phantom. It looked almost like a child, stumbling, lost. Panic twisted in my gut. Could it be another victim from the forest? Were they all trapped in some horrific cycle of despair? I revved the engine, glancing between the rearview mirror and the darkening woods. The woman remained, her gaze fixed on me, pleading. I fought the urge to drive off and instead opened my door, my heartbeat thunderous in my ears. "Wait!" I shouted, surprising myself with the force of my voice. That moment of hesitation was all it took. The childlike figure darted away, deeper into the forest, becoming just another wisp of shadow. I was left there, heart racing, with the woman still standing motionless, as if waiting for me to make a choice. Then I realized something else. There was now an echo of a different sound. The unmistakable soft cry of a baby reverberating in the distance, threading through the air like a long-lost memory. I had to find out where it was coming from. Deep down, a voice urged me forward. Whatever the forest had to say, I knew that I needed to uncover its secrets. I slammed the car door shut, my resolve strengthening. I wasn't done yet. With the shadows growing longer, I turned back toward the trees, taking a deep breath. Something was waiting in there, more than whispers. I could feel it pulling at me, and I had to know why. Was I ready to face it? I had to find out. I stepped cautiously back onto the path, feeling the cool embrace of the trees surrounding me once more. The forest loomed around me like a thick curtain, swallowing the last rays of the sun. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. I tried to focus on the cries that echoed in the distance, the pleas intertwining with the rustling leaves. There was a tension in the air, a vibrancy that felt alive and unnerving. I followed the sound, heart pounding. Each step felt like an offering to the shadows. The underbrush crackled under my feet, and I caught glimpses of twirling shapes in the corner of my eye. I didn't dare look directly at them. I feared what I might find. Instead, I zeroed in on the cries, sharp and brittle. As I pushed deeper into the woods, the canopy thickened, blocking the remnants of dusk. The air grew colder, chilling me to the bone. I reached a clearing and my breath caught. The ground was strewn with more of those faded rags, just like the one I'd found in my car. They fluttered gently in the breeze, an eerie chorus that sent fresh waves of dread through me. I knelt to examine one, my hands shaking as I traced the symbols with trembling fingers. It felt like they were burning into my skin. What were they trying to communicate? I needed answers. But the more I thought, the more I felt lost in this web of mystery. Then I heard it again. The soft cry, closer now. I stood up, scanning the trees, and saw it, a small white shape nestled at the base of a tree. I took a cautious step forward, every instinct screaming at me to turn back, but I couldn't shake the pull of that sound. I made my way toward the figure, my heart racing, each step heavier than the last. As I drew near, dread twisted in my gut. It wasn't a baby. It was a doll. A ragged, dirt-streaked thing that looked like it had been abandoned for years. Its button eyes stared blankly into the void, and in its hand was another piece of that fabric, the same one with the strange symbols. I picked it up gingerly, my pulse quickening. Suddenly the cry transformed, now echoing all around me, louder, shaping itself into a cacophony of whispers. I stumbled back, the doll slipping from my fingers and landing with a dull thud. The shadows grew thicker, swirling and closing in. "What do you want?" I shouted, voice trembling. Silence fell abruptly, pressing in on me from all sides. "Who are you?" A rush of wind swept through the clearing, carrying a voice on its wings. "We are lost," it said, almost playfully, yet weighed with grief. I spun around, searching for the source. There was no one there, no sign of the woman or child, only the darkest parts of the forest, the figures twisted and alive after all. I turned back to the doll, swallowing my rising panic. For the first time I realized I wasn't just wandering through the woods. I was part of something far larger, caught in a narrative I couldn't yet understand. My hands trembled as I picked up the doll, determination now mixing with fear. As I clutched it tightly, the whispers intensified, filling my ears with fragments of stories, of despair, loss, and promises made long ago. I had disturbed something ancient. I could feel it. Then I saw a flicker out of the corner of my eye, a familiar figure stepping closer, draped in shadows, with those piercing eyes locked onto mine. Fear surged within me, but I stood my ground. I couldn't let go now. I had to know the truth. The figure stepped closer, and I could finally make out details. It was a woman, her face obscured by shadows. Her hair flowed like ink against the dark backdrop of the trees, framing eyes that shimmered like stars. I felt an unsettling mix of recognition and fear. I knew I'd seen her before, but couldn't place where. Was it in a dream, or in one of the stories I'd heard as a child? "Who are you?" I managed to ask, my voice shaky. She held up a hand, silencing the rustling of the forest around us. "You must listen. They are calling for help," she said, her voice a whisper that seemed to echo through the clearing. "The lost ones. They are trapped in this world, caught between the light and the dark." I looked around, heart pounding. The whispers swirled around me, making it difficult to think. "Why me?" I asked, clutching the doll as if it were a lifeline. "Because you found them," she replied, eyes gleaming. "The rags, the symbols, they bind their stories to you now. You can either set them free or become part of the wandering." Panic trickled through me. "I don't understand." "Follow me," she instructed, moving deeper into the shadows. "Your fear is holding them back. You need to release it. Only then will you uncover the truth." Against my better judgment, I stepped forward, curiosity getting the better of me. She beckoned me with an almost graceful sweep, gliding through the trees. The shadows parted where she walked, revealing a narrow path I hadn't seen before. As I moved along the trail, the cries intensified. They became a symphony of sorrow, wrapping around me, tugging at my heart. I didn't want to ignore them, but dread washed over me like a cold wave, threatening to drag me under. "What happened to them?" I called after her, desperation creeping into my voice. "Injustice," she replied tersely. "You're not the first to wander here. Many have come, drawn by their stories, but few have had the courage to face the truth." With each step, I felt the weight of her words. She paused suddenly, looking back at me, her face bathed in the dim light that fell from somewhere unseen. "Do you wish to turn back?" I hesitated. I could feel the pull of uncertainty, but I also felt the fire of determination. "No," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I need to know what's going on." "Then hold on to the doll," she instructed. "It's a key. You must unlock what lies ahead." The path ahead darkened, shadows nudging closer, hungry with whispers of the past. It felt like there were eyes watching me from the blackness, waiting for me to unravel the secret. That's when I saw it, a flicker of light just past a thicket. Through the branches, a small clearing glowed, illuminating figures dancing within it. As I stepped closer, my heart raced. I could see the faces of the lost ones, all familiar yet distorted, caught in an endless loop of grief and longing. And then I felt a grip on my ankle. I looked down to find a pair of small hands clutching at me from the shadows. I gasped, trying to pull away, but the hands only tightened. "Help us!" a small voice whimpered. I stood frozen, my breath hitching in my throat. The doll slipped from my fingers, tumbling into darkness. In that moment I realized I was not just a visitor. I was now a part of their story. What would I choose to do? The hands tightened around my ankle, and dread rippled through me. I wanted to run. I should have run. But I couldn't leave them. That small voice, so filled with sorrow, pulled at my heartstrings. "Please help us," it repeated, its grip surprisingly strong. I lowered myself to the ground, heart racing. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, hoping the darkness would offer answers. The shadowy figures in the clearing danced around the light, their faces twisting into expressions of despair. The woman stood a little ways off, watching, her expression unreadable. "Find the doll," the tiny voice urged. "It's the only way." I felt a surge of panic. The doll, the key to this whole mess. I scrambled to stand, casting frantic glances around the clearing. "Where is it?" I shouted, hoping for any sign. The figures spun faster around the light, their movements a blur of grief and need. "Listen," the voice whispered again, this time louder, as if pushing through the clamor. "It's hiding in the shadows. Light the way." My hands trembled, and I reached for the darkness, my fingers tangling in the cold air around me. Light! Suddenly a spark of hope flickered within me. I still had the charm around my neck. It hadn't done much so far, but maybe I hadn't tried hard enough. My fingers brushed against it. I took a deep breath and focused on the energy pulsing from it. I raised the charm high, pouring all my fear and determination into it. "Show me," I murmured, and the charm pulsed in response, bathing the path around me in a warm glow. The shadows receded slightly, revealing outlines of twisted branches and gnarled roots. "Over there!" the small voice urged again, and I squinted into the directional glow. There, just beyond the flickering light, lay the doll, half buried in fallen leaves and dirt. Without thinking, I rushed toward it, each step forcing courage into my shaky legs. When I reached the doll, I felt an overwhelming wave of relief. I picked it up, brushing off the leaves, but a sense of dread replaced the relief almost immediately. What if I wasn't meant to find it? What if I unleashed something worse? I turned, clutching the doll tightly, but the shadows had shifted. The figures were now approaching, their faces no longer distorted, but a blend of worry and pleading. "You found it," they chorused, their voices merging into a haunting melody. "Yes, I have it," I said, but my confidence wavered. The woman stepped closer, and I could see the urgency in her eyes. "Use it," she commanded, and the other figures nodded in agreement. "Unlock their stories, set them free." My heart raced. What did that mean? Could I really do it? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their lost hope pressing on me. With trembling hands, I held the doll above my head. The charm around my neck pulsed again, sending out a wave of light that cascaded through the clearing, illuminating the lost faces. As the glow intensified, the shadows shrieked and writhed. The air crackled with energy, and I staggered back, caught off guard. Something was happening, something I hadn't anticipated. The figures stopped dancing as the light enveloped them. Their expressions shifted from sorrow to something like joy, and then they began to fade, one by one, dissolving like mist in the dawn. "Wait!" I cried out, but my voice was lost in the cacophony of whispers swelling around me. "Don't go!" But they only smiled, mouths forming silent words I couldn't grasp. The last thing I heard was the small voice, softening, "Thank you." Then everything went dark. I stood alone in the clearing, the charm dangling in the absence of their warmth, and the weight of the unknown hung heavy in the air. What had I done? As I struggled to catch my breath, I felt a new presence, something lurking in the dark behind me. I turned, dread clawing at my insides. Someone was there. I felt my breath hitch in my throat. The silence was deafening, broken only by the rustling leaves and the soft crunch of dirt. I squinted into the darkness, trying to make out the figure, but it was too faint. My instincts screamed for me to run, yet I stood frozen. "Who's there?" I finally called out, forcing my voice to remain steady. The shadows didn't answer. Instead, they shifted, stirring slightly, as if in response to my fear. Then I saw it. A shape emerging, features sharpening in the dull light of my charm. It was a man, his eyes glimmering faintly, and suddenly I felt an undeniable connection. He looked familiar, though I couldn't place him. "You came for the doll," he said softly, his voice low and edged with a mixture of hope and warning. "You must understand what you've done." "What do you mean?" I stepped back, clutching the doll tighter as if it could shield me from him. "I thought I was helping." The man's eyes flicked to the doll in my hands, and something like sorrow washed over his face. "Help is complicated," he said. "You've released their stories, but you may have opened a door that should remain closed." A cold chill took hold of my spine. I wanted to argue, to demand answers. Instead, my mouth went dry and I struggled to gather my thoughts. "Who are you?" I asked, desperate for clarity. "Someone who should have walked away." He hesitated, eyes scanning the forest as the shadows writhed more actively now, feeling like they were almost alive. "Those spirits you've encountered, they're trapped. Their stories are intertwined with this place, and now they've been awakened. Something else has taken notice." My heart raced again. The air felt heavier around me, and I could almost hear faint cries, distant but real. I knew I shouldn't be there, that I needed to escape. I turned to flee, but he grabbed my arm, his grip firm yet desperate. "Listen to me. You don't know what you've set in motion." I jerked away, my pulse quickening. "Then tell me, what do I need to do?" "The doll," he breathed, looking increasingly anxious. "You must keep it safe. If it falls into the wrong hands—" He trailed off, the implications clear. Suddenly the shadows swirled closer, and the atmosphere thickened. An eerie sound, like a low growl, echoed from the depths of the forest. "They're coming," he said, his gaze darting toward the dark expanse. I felt an overwhelming fear claw at my chest. "Who's coming?" "Those who want the doll for their own purposes." In that instant the shadows moved again, coalescing into darker shapes. I could see figures emerging, eyes glinting like knives, intent on one thing, the charm I held. They wanted it, needed it. and I was standing in their way. Panic surged through me as I backed away. No, I won't let them take it. Then in the periphery of my vision I saw movement, a shadow that didn't belong to the forest. It was tall and menacing, a sentient part of the darkness itself. A deeper sense of dread flooded me. What had I truly awakened? I turned to the man, but he was gone, swallowed by shadows. I was alone, surrounded by whispers of the past, and the terrifying reality of what was to come. I had to act. The only way out was to confront this nightmare, but how? My heart thudded in fear as the darkness pressed closer. I glanced once more at the doll. That's when I saw it, a flicker of light at its core, pulsing with an energy I could almost touch. What did I need to do to release it? Before I could ponder it any longer, something lunged forward, and I braced myself for the impending chaos. I stumbled back as the air crackled with tension, the shadows swirling around me. Panic tightened in my chest as the dark shapes approached, forming into indistinct figures with glimmering eyes. I had no idea how to save myself or what awaited me in the darkness, but I knew I couldn't let them take the doll. "Get away from me!" I shouted, raising the doll defiantly as if it were a weapon. The flickering light inside pulsed rhythmically, bizarrely reassuring. I could feel the power thrumming through it, but I had no idea how to harness it. As the figures lunged forward, wisps of shadow intertwined with their forms, creating a terrifying dance of the lost and the damned. I focused on the light emanating from the doll, pouring all my hope and fear into it. "If you want to take me, you'll have to go through this first," I yelled, my voice echoing in the bizarre silence. With trembling hands, I pressed the doll against my chest and closed my eyes, summoning every ounce of courage I had left. "Show me how to use you," I whispered, desperation weaving itself through my words. The light flared brighter, and a wave of warmth washed over me, calming my racing heart. Suddenly, memories flooded my mind, images of the lost spirits I had encountered, their stories woven into the fabric of the forest. The whispers that had haunted me didn't belong to the shadows, but to the dying echoes of those souls still searching for peace. "Help us!" Their voices cried out in unison, filling my ears like a chorus. I opened my eyes just in time to see the figures falter. Their advances slowed, imperfect reflections of the former pain that birthed their anger. With that revelation blaring in my head, I turned to them, lifting the doll above my head like a beacon. "You don't have to be trapped anymore. You have stories that need to be told," I called out, the power swelling within me. "Let go of your darkness. You're not alone. I'm here to help." The shadows jerked back, swirling erratically as if struggling to break free from my words. The figures flickered, caught between vengeance and the hope I offered. I felt the pulse of the doll, inviting their stories to resurface. What had once been anger slowly transformed into sorrow, filling the space with a poignant silence. The lead figure stepped forward, more human now, a woman with sorrowful eyes. "You can help us?" she asked softly, uncertainty weaving through her tone. "You want us to be free?" "Yes!" I cried, the words bursting forth like a dam bursting its confines. "Let go of the pain! Embrace what you once were! Trust me!" At my words, the flickering shadows began to dissipate, their sorrowful forms swirling into gentle streams of light. I felt a surge of energy from the doll, the glow brightening as they transformed. It was no longer about confronting the darkness, it was about freeing them from it. "Thank you," the woman cried, her voice an echo cascading through the trees. "You have awakened us." I could feel their lingering presence, threading through the air around me like a soothing melody. The figures danced away, leaping into the light, their anguish having shifted into peace. But just as their shadows began to scatter, a cold presence swept through the clearing, dark and oppressive, reminding me of the lurking dangers. My heart sank. The darkness clung to the whispering winds. Something worse still loomed in the shadows. With the last of my energy, I grabbed the doll tightly, knowing I had to finish what I had started. "Stay back!" I shouted, directing it at the encroaching figures. You have no power over me." But the shadows coiled tighter, tightening their grip. An echoing roar reverberated through the trees, and the darkness twisted. I realized I needed to keep moving forward, keep the light alive. I turned and ran, pushing through the trees, my breath ragged and heart-pounding. I could feel the shadows trailing behind me like an anxious predator. Yet I pressed on, the whispers urging me to persevere. "Keep going, you're almost there," they seemed to say, until finally breaking free of the trees. As the light of the setting sun spilled across my path, I stumbled, feeling the last tendrils of darkness slip away. I dared one last glance behind me. The figures lingered at the edge of the tree line, no longer menacing but watching with calm recognition. Their sorrow transformed, they whispered, "You did it!" And then they disappeared, leaving me breathless and confused. I was outside the forest, standing alone, the gentle night air wrapping around me. Questions flowed through my mind like an endless stream. What had truly happened? Had I freed their souls, or had I merely stirred something untamed? The whispers still echoed softly in my mind, remnants of their histories swirling around me. I turned to head back to my car, that strange exchange hanging heavy in my chest. I would never understand all of it, but one thing was clear. The forest had revealed more than I ever expected. I glanced back one final time, uncertainty twisting in my gut. The mysteries tethered in shadows would remain, but somewhere within that darkness, the lost had found their way home. As I drove away, a mixture of relief and unease settled within me. I'd survived, and yet I knew I would never fully escape the forest's grasp. The whispers would linger, a haunting reminder that darkness and light often blurred together in ways we could never fully comprehend. I couldn't help but wonder, had I truly found peace for myself, or was I now a keeper of their stories, forever tied to the whispering shadows?